It's the Practical Prayer Podcast pre-show on New Thought Media Network. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, or good evening, I guess, if you're way over that direction. I'm Bill, that's Carol, and we are getting ready to record another episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast. This is number 189. Whew. Numbers get up in nosebleed territory. It's just like, what happened? What happened?
I don't know. It's just baffles me. 189. I'm like, really? Okay.
Yeah, pretty amazing. I actually I posted the topic for my talk this coming Sunday, which is 2,500 days, and I actually got somebody to say, "What's the significance of that?" And I've been doing my daily meditation, and I use Insight Timers, so it tells me how many days in a row I've done. And when I looked at when 2,500 days would be, it's next Sunday.
Okay. So you do this every day in a row for 2,500 days.
2,500 days. That's like since 2017 or something.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's the power of either a habit or a practice or refusal to let go, attachment.
Yeah, but I think either way is good. I
That's what
do.
I'm going with. Yeah. So 189, also good. Do we? And by the way, I'm going to tell the folks who are joining us on New Thought Media Network that if you have a question or a comment, you can feel free to put it into the chat, the comments on social media, and we will be able to see those and respond to you in an appropriate fashion. If you're not watching live, you go to the website bethelight.com, and there's a similar, similar button over there where you can send a message to us with the same
Yeah.
prayer requests or comments or insights or whatever. Yeah, and we'll be happy to either answer them or ignore you or critique the way the question was asked, whatever it is that we do when that comes along. So we managed to surprise each other. I came into the studio and you weren't here, and then I started doing other things and you showed up and I didn't notice. So you're listening to me. And I'm looking for you, but then there we are. So I guess that means we're pretty casual about this. A
Yeah, I
familiar,
guess so.
a familiar groove. So do you have a topic for us for today?
Yes. Yeah.
Ye-
Well, a couple topics, but one is synchronicities.
Okay.
So, let's see. How do synchronicities um, play out in manifestations?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's like ground zero for them. So now you got me intrigued. And before I start giving you all my answers in the pre-show, let's go ahead and start the podcast, and then you can ask me in the actual recording part. Ooh, synchronicities.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Hi.
That's your cue.
Mr. No. No wonder you looked at me like that. Okay. Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol here with Reverend Bill Marchiony.
I'm looking forward to a very entertaining conversation. We seem to be, we're at episode number 189, and we've gotten, as I was referring to it before we got into the podcast, pretty casual. Pretty casual about this. It's like, and that's the opposite of getting wrapped around the axle. Oh my God, we're going to talk about how we're going to fill a half an hour, which generally winds up being 40 minutes anyway. And the answer is we're going to do this, and it's going to be great, and it's been great all along. And the folks who like it, and the folks who don't like it, listen to somebody frothing at the mouth about politics.
Yeah.
Did I ruin it for you?
I've just been in a state of awe. Every now and then I'm just like, oh, no, come
Yeah.
back, Carol. You're all right. It's all right.
It'll be okay.
Yeah.
So you had an interesting topic that you wanted to go over today, and and I think it's a little distracting when you say it, but it winds up being really core. So go ahead and talk about it.
Okay, so synchronicities. I have little to no understanding about them, but I do know that people are very excited about them, and they appear in sequential numbers and other things. Well, how does this relate to manifestation? There's the synchronicities. Wow, ooh, that just happened. Did you see that? And I'm thinking, okay, so is that the universe giving assurance? Is it, what exactly does that mean to folks?
It depends on what's showing up looking like a synchronicity, because sometimes there are things that happen and just by happenstance we're paying attention when they do. And we say, oh, isn't that amazing? It's like when you look at the digital clock and the time is 11:11. I love that one because there's only one. And I have family members who will text each other at 11:11 if they happen to catch and notice it. Same thing at 12:34 when it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 3:21. And it's like, oh, I looked up and it was 11:11 again. It's like, okay, well, yay. Is that a synchronicity? It was going to be 11:11 whether you looked or not. And if you just happen to be looking at the clock, then that's great. And if you've been doing it long enough, your body clock knows about when it's going to be 11:11, so that might be encouraging you to look at it. So, does that take away any of the magic or the importance or the excitement of it? Not necessarily. That's the synchronicity. I happen to be looking at the clock, and it happened to be showing that time. And the same thing, every story of love at first sight is two people who were in some unlikely location and they looked at each other and it's like, wow, let's do something different. And their paths changed. Is that a synchronicity? Is that fate? Is that the law of attraction? What's going on there? And I'll ask you before I give my opinion.
Well, you brought in a lot of different things. The law of attraction, I get it, 100%, all the different ways that you can look at it. I think that is largely in play when people meet each other, although they can, their free will can do it another way, resistance and all that business. But synchronicities, I can't get the connection in terms of it being a yay, go ahead. This is a good thing, and I'm not sure.
Okay.
Like you talked about the telephone calls and things like that. That's nice, but what else?
I think of them as a reminder, and I actually had an experience of that. There's a member of the New Thought Philly spiritual community who'd been very active for a couple of years, and she changed jobs and she graduated from grad school and she was going through all sorts of other exciting things in her life. And about a year ago, lost touch with her. She just kind of vanished. And, I would periodically ping her and say, hey, is everything going okay? And she's from another country, so I was a little concerned that she's getting deported or something like that. But every time I reached out, I didn't hear anything back. And then on Friday morning in the daily meditation, she showed up. And she has not been deported, although some of her coworkers have been deported. And she's doing really well. And the graduate program that she was working on to get her PhD was a lot more work than she anticipated. So one of the things that fell off of her plate was us. It happens. And now she's deciding that, I'm rebalancing the stuff on my plate. And becoming a PhD is not as important or not as urgent and certainly not on the same schedule as getting all the rest of these pieces together, and she's back. And for me, the synchronicities that I'd been thinking about her for a couple of weeks before that, even understanding the futility that I experienced and trying to reach out to her, and then up she showed.
So, but that, what is the, unless my view of synchronicities is just, narrow, because when you talked about, you thought about her and she got in touch with you, and, to me, that's something different.
Okay,
That's,
so you tell me what a synchronicity is, and then we'll talk
oh,
about how that fits.
I don't know, but I know that people talk about it a lot, and it's the numbers you talked about, like sequential numbers. And I'm trying to figure out, am I missing something here in terms of if to remind me of something, remind me of what exactly? You
And
Sorry.
for that, you would actually have to ask the people who are talking about how important the synchronicities are. What I have noticed in all of those things is that there is an overlap between somebody's belief system and their experience, and then they use their experience to reinforce their belief system. So I believe that the world works this way, and then every time I get evidence that the world is working that way, I shout about it, and I celebrate it, and I point to it, and I tell all my friends about it, whether it does it or not.
Now that makes sense, right? That's not that what you said before didn't, but this brings this brings a lot of logic to it, a lot of clarity to it. When you said belief systems, people believe a lot of different stuff. It doesn't it even in the same church, there's just tons of different beliefs, even in who God is, what to expect, how it all works, however you want to call it, say it. It's belief systems, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a wonder that we agree on anything. And sometimes I'm thinking, okay, so this is why there is so very much chaos all around, because we're just out of sync with each other, it feels, and I find that very, very hurtful, and disappointing, because how did this all happen? Then okay, so I understand human nature and all that business, but it just seems like things just got all out of hand. And I bring it back to, it's what you believe about everything,
Mm-hmm.
about God, about prayer, about everything. And then there's what you talk about, the ego insists that my way is correct. So then we have a very difficult time finding a place of agreement with anything.
Yep. Yep. That is absolutely true. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Whenever we get a sense of us over here and them over there, which is an extension of the things like duality and separation that we've been talking about for the last, actually, a few months at this point. As soon as we think that there's something separating us from something or someone else or some other idea, then the conversation turns from what's the good over here and what's the good over there to what's in the gap between us.
Mm-hmm.
I have this, they don't have this, so they are fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's the self-righteous belief in God, that's one thing, and if it's herpes, that's another thing, and this is what's over here, and that's what's over there, and there's this gap between us. And the important thing to remember, and the foundational part about the whole New Thought philosophy, is that there is one power, one presence, one love, one intelligence. It's the divine, and everything is that infinite presence shared in a specific way. So it's not like you and I are separate. We are two different aspects or instances of the infinite, and we're showing up in different ways. And from the inside, it looks like we're separate, and that's okay. But as soon as I get into judgment about your path, because I have not been walking it, I have not been experiencing it, I have not been living it, I have no idea what it means for you. I don't have, and I can't, it's completely absurd for me to put a value judgment on the experience that you've been having because I haven't been having it.
But that takes a lot to say that, because the threat is I might be wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and there's no need for that threat. So I peel the onion, and say, okay, so we understand where the departure is. So if I'm wrong, what does it matter? The fear, then there's the fear beneath that layer. Um, if I'm wrong, then I might have to change. And if I change, then what's going to happen? Because I've put a whole lot of energy into this particular belief. And then the whole thing to me gets to an absence of God, or not the absence of God, but the absence of my acknowledging the God that is, which is in both of us,
Mm-hmm.
and the word that we say, the greeting that we say, namaste, and it's a nice word, it's a
Mm-hmm.
very nice word. But when you look at what it really means, I think it's a reset for me every time I say it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can this not be a reset? I'm recognizing the God that's in you, and you're recognizing God is in me, and it's the same one, and that's a reset.
Yep.
And to me, it's a such a fortunate thing. But when you just make it just a greeting or just a hey, it's like, hey, what's happening? But it's what you spiritual people say instead of, hey, how you doing? We'll say namaste. It just
Right.
loses its huge purpose,
Right.
or
And
its
in
huge
its
meaning.
original use in India, namaste is usually reserved for the people who you spend a lot of time with, family members, close business associates, your boss. Those are the ones
Hmm.
it's like, you're going to have that very close, very familiar greeting with. And there's something that you said, which I think is inadvertently a westernization. I see the God in you and you see the God in me. And it's the God in me sees the God in you. And quite frankly, it'd be nice if you saw the God in me, but I'm seeing the God in me. And you can recognize it or not. It's still there.
Uh, I'm hearing you, and I see it as the same thing.
Okay. Well, one of them
Because
requires that the other person agree with it.
okay, so the God in me recognizes the God in you,
Right. Right.
and we're both saying it.
Yep. Well,
We're
we
both
can both
saying it.
say it.
So
But
that
if you say it with the expectation that somebody's going to repeat it back to you, then you get into the whole world of head games.
that's exactly right. So, here I go peeling back the onion, the layers of the onion again. This is where we meet at this
Yep.
level of understanding. And once we go there one time, it's there. It's like that
Yeah.
seed that's planted. That's why I said it's the same thing, because it's a place that we meet. And you could depart from it if you wish,
Yeah.
but you will always come back to that knowing. I believe that.
One of the exercises that we go through in the spiritual classes from time to time is what is the appropriate response when somebody says, I love you? So I'll ask you, what's the appropriate response when somebody says, I love you? I'll try it. I love you.
Thank you.
That's the right response. And sometimes people say, I love you too. And that's fine because in that case, the cue, the prompt of "I love you" coming from somebody else is a reminder. Oh yeah, I love you, and I want to be settle into that same groove and elevate this relationship out of the effortful project that we've been working on, and remind myself that there's love here, so I can celebrate that love. And the slippery slope is that when we get into a dysfunctional relationship and we want somebody to tell us that we're lovable, we want to hear that we're loved. Instead of saying, can you tell me you love me? We say, I love you, hoping we're going to get an I love you back. That's twisty.
Yeah.
And That's not a synchronicity. That's a manipulation.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I think maybe I'm getting in my own way here because the I love you and expecting the I love you back, I don't expect that.
Right. And this is probably not an exercise for you, but there's a really easy way to tell which one it is. When somebody says I love you, say thank you, and that's all. And some people will think it's really cool, and some people will get like wrapped around the axle about what sort of an inappropriate response that was. And the ones who get upset about it are the ones who wanted you to say I love you back.
I suppose what it's what you're saying. I look at it. It's a compliment, for in that in that instance.
Yeah.
I feel it as a compliment, and so I thank you for that compliment. Um, you
Yeah.
want me to say it back? Suppose I don't at the
Right.
moment. you know. But
And if somebody wants me to say I love you to them, just ask me. Can you tell me you love me? Of course, I love you. Can you tell me about something nice that I've done for you? It's like, well, it depends on what you just did recently. It might take a little while for me to get over those issues and think of something nice.
yeah, okay, okay.
Let's revisit synchronicities. And synchronicities are when things happen and we are aware of the chain of events, the sequence that brought those into being. And sometimes they can be really meaningful and very powerful, and sometimes they're just coincidences. And I'm not dismissing coincidences because it's possible, if you look at it in a particular way, that everything that happens in the universe is just one big happy coincidence. But we'll put a pin in that one just for now. There's a story in the Practical Prayer for Real Results book about when I was first learning to do practical prayer. We were living in Florida, in Tampa, and we had gotten a babysitter, and we had season tickets anyway for Disney. So my wife and I were going to go to Epcot for dinner, which is an only Florida thing, because usually you have to pay to get into Epcot and all the rest of it. So we get in the car, and we're driving up the interstate, and a thunderstorm hits. And in Florida, thunderstorms can be very quick and really intense. So it starts pouring rain with the thunder coming down. The traffic slows to like 10 miles an hour. You can hardly see anything in front of you. It's just, it's getting dangerous. It's like, this is not a good idea. We got to not do this. We got to work out plan B, turn around, go back home, let the babysitter go, and then see if we can work this out again, even though it had taken a long time to put the plan together. And then, wait a second, I'm just learning to do this practical prayer thing. Let me give that a try. And so my wife and I, driving in the car, did the prayer, about there being one power and presence, one love that's showing up as everything, everywhere. It's me, it's her, it's the weather, it's the trip to Disney, it's all of the pieces that are coming together now that are causing this calamity right now. There's no need for it. It's possible for the storm to go wherever it belongs, for us to be in our perfect place, to have our perfect experience. Grateful for this, and so it is. Honest to God, just I got to so it is, and the rain stopped. And that was like from full torrential downpour to nothing. And if you spend any time in Florida, you know that it can happen that way there. Just stopped. Like, we look at each other, whoa. that was amazing. And that was a synchronicity. I mean, the storm might have been doing whatever it was going to do, and it would have stopped whether we prayed or not. Or it's possible that there were things going on in the upper atmosphere that would have slowed it down and kept it on top of us, and it would have rained more and more and more. But something came together, and we observed it as a synchronicity, and it was a great encouragement. Not only that we were having a wonderful evening out, but a reminder of how powerful this prayer practice is. Because we drove the rest of the way to Disney, and when we got there, the Epcot parking lot, we parked in the closest in space that there was to the park entrance, because everybody who was there had left because it was raining. The storm came through ahead of us and cleared out all the people. And then we noticed, as we were walking through the park, it had rinsed it, so that Epcot was pristine and clean. We went and had dinner. We came out of the restaurant, and their fireworks show was starting. And no crowds. It was it went from being a near calamity through a series of fortunate events, synchronicities, that we wound up having an absolutely delightful evening that I'm talking about like 30 years later. So synchronicities are possible. Do you want to attach any specific importance to any of those events? You can. Makes a great story. That's why I put it in the book. But for me, it was just such a reminder that the prayer practice is important. And I don't control the weather. I've had some wonderful examples of doing a prayer and having the weather work out perfectly. Including one where there was a threatened thunderstorm and I wanted the weather to be perfect because I was with my teen group and there was like evening activities and we had a telescope and there was a lunar eclipse or something that night. We were going to take it out and look at the lunar eclipse. And it was pouring rain and there was no possibility for the lunar eclipse. And the experiential activity that we were involved in was so deep and so profound with my group that if it had not been raining and I'd wanted to meet the schedule and go out and look at the moon, we would have shortchanged the entire process. Another example of a synchronicity. It was not what I was praying for, but it was exactly what I was praying for.
So I don't know. It's coincidence, or I'm not sure.
Right. I'm not sure
I'm
either.
not sure.
Let's take a break and then we will talk about the big happy coincidences.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marchiony's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
We're having a wonderful conversation about synchronicity and things and noticing how things are fitting together as the time approaches 3:21, 3:21, or 4:3:21, or whatever. And sometimes it happens in numbers, and sometimes it happens in sequences, and sometimes people see numbers and say, I'm going to go play that in a lottery. And that's fine. And if they win, great. I don't know how that happens. It has not happened for me. I'd be okay with it happening. But sometimes stuff just happens. And we attach much more importance to it than is actually there.
Yeah. And I wouldn't dare want to say, because I was thinking of this, I would not dare want to say, listen, this is just confusing, right? This is because it could be quite meaningful to others. And I see that. I don't get it always, but it's meaningful to them. And I just assume, well, that's just one that I don't get, at least right now anyway.
Yeah. I have some friends and family members who are into astrology. And I think astrology is fascinating because there seem to be a lot of characteristics in common of people who have similar signs or similar aspects in their astrological chart. And I'm not sure for myself whether it's the astrological planet positions when they were born was particularly what impacted their personality to be that way. Or perhaps it was they were ready to come in with a particular personality and timing got assorted such that they came in as a Libra. I don't know how it is that happens. I do know that it's very helpful to be able to describe what's going on in, I was going to say in our world, but it's actually our perception and understanding of the world by coming up with some of these general categories. And for a lot of folks, it's really helpful. And for the part that's helpful, go for it. And if it's just like, if you're not believing it, and if you're just trying to work it out because somebody else wants you to, then it doesn't necessarily have any meaning, and it might not even show up.
It's I agree with that, in the sense that I don't have a lot of resistance to anything that people believe in, because if it's true for them, and I'm assuming you put some energy and some thought and you got some experiences that have made it real for you, who am I to say it's not so just because I have not experienced that? Give it a month or so and I might, but even if I don't, it's still okay because it doesn't invalidate you at all if I don't believe it. It's just that I'm not there. And quite frankly, I'm not there about a lot of things in life, perhaps. So it's a growth when somebody is, but you brought up astrology, and I didn't know a thing about astrology other than, way back in the day, you look up your horoscope for the day. And I'm a Gemini, and you seem to know me very well because I'm a Gemini. Well, okay. You see something that I don't. That's a divine whisper that is whispering to you. It whispers to me in another way. And I think that's okay, right? I think it's
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's absolutely okay. There are people who do Western medicine, where we use chemical compounds and mechanical procedures and other forms of physical manipulation to get a change in the experience of the person who's the patient, and they work. And there's Eastern medicine. There's the acupuncture and acupressure and Chinese herbs, all of which I've used from time to time, and all of which are completely valuable. Ayurveda and Marma Point, where it's pressing on the same sorts of meridians. I've had wonderful success with some of that stuff, and it all kind of depends on what fits into our belief system. If somebody looks at something and says, "Yeah, I don't think that's the thing," then it's not. I used to be I don't see auras, and I used to not be able to sense energy at all. And then I went to one of those mind, body, spirit expo things, and somebody had a whole wall of those crystal salt lamps that was turned on, and it was just overwhelming. It's like, why is that so bright and powerful? It's like, oh, that's the same energy in auras. You're just getting overpowered by it. And yeah, we should get away from here because it's crazy. And getting to experience it that way, I still don't see auras, and I'm much more attuned to people's energies. And I'm also much more supportive for folks who are talking about energy flow and chi and the kundalini and other sources of energy, because that's all the universe is. It is energy that's showing up as matter and intelligence and consciousness driving the whole thing. So yeah, it all switches back and forth, and if I can see it or not see it, it doesn't change the nature of it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said it the way you did, because to me, it's like you can't put the universe in a box and say it only shows up like this, and that over there is, because that's what happens in church.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't experience the spirit in a certain way, then you're illegitimate. You're not, you know, you're not going to be. You lose out on a lot of things, and I don't want to say any more because then it's like I'm picking on somebody.
Have to defend
But
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, but then the other side of that is that's not, and I don't want to use the word loving because it kind of gets. I'm trying to get away from the mushy perception that people have about love, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
love demanding the same thing back. It's just, let's just say, it's just respect. It's respect for how, not just for me and for you, but how the universe works, how God, the principle, whatever name you want to put it together, certainly has the privilege of godness to express itself however.
Hmm.
And you may have a way that God expresses for you. Example, I always talked about how I love music, and if I had another life, I am thinking about negotiating whether I come back as a musician. It's that important to me. Whether that's true or not, it explains the feeling. But that gift of music that comes from people in so many different ways is different, but no more no more divine than another way that God expresses God's self.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all the same. Well, you use the term one, and that is it. It's just all one. And I like this, and you like it that way, but it is still it that we gravitate toward, that we that we're relating to.
All right. So two things. First of all, when you come back as a musician, are you okay coming back with one who's busking in the subway, or do you want to be Taylor Swift or Beyonce?
No, no, I don't want to be Taylor Swift or anything like that. No, I don't. Um,
Busking in the
here's
subway is a little downscale for you.
there's a medium, I think.
Okay, that's where I was
Um,
going.
yeah, I love the idea of the little jazz clubs. I just absolutely love those. But here's the thing. Here's this is the whatever the deal breaker. Musicians, and I get it. Honestly, I really think I know what's going on here. They just don't have such a good life. Do you know what I mean? They exit early. They have a lot of tragedy in their life. I
Well,
get
some
it.
of them, yeah. Some of them,
Yeah,
not
some,
all of them.
but there's sometimes there's different kind of tragedies. And I'm not saying they all do, but I'm saying it's clearly to me there is something there. I'm not sure I want to do that. Right?
Oh, you mean if that's the package deal, you don't want the whole package.
No, I don't, because I got no. Leave it at
Yeah.
that.
All right.
Yeah.
I mentioned happy coincidence a little bit, big happy coincidences, and I'll flesh out the story because when we're talking about how practical prayer works, we start with our creation story. What we believe was where this all came from. And for some people, it's the Big Bang. There was the singularity that began expanding and exploding and then reacting and interacting. And it's all just energy. And the energy is slowly turning itself into matter, and then the matter interacts. And everything has evolved since that one Big Bang. So that's one creation story. In which case we know that everything that exists everywhere came from the Big Bang because there was nothing else. So all the intelligence, all the love, all the energy, all the matter came from the one and continues to do that. And that's how we get to remind ourselves that we're part of the one because it couldn't have been anything else. Another creation story is the one that's in Scripture. In the beginning there was darkness and void, and God said, let there be. Or in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and God said, and there was. In those stories, before the universe came into being, there's just God. And so we're tracing ourselves back to that oneness. The other creation story, the big umbrella one that I can think of, is the big happy coincidence. So it wasn't God. There was no Big Bang. Things are just here the way that they are now, and they're continuing to unfold and reveal themselves in the ways that they are. It is just a coincidence. Okay, isn't that a wonderful, big happy coincidence that here I am in a universe that is completely built to support me? I take a breath in, everything that I need in that breath is supplied to me. I don't have to mix the gas myself. I don't need to figure it out. I don't need to turn the knob to make sure the gravity keeping me on the surface of the planet is working properly. It's all taken care of. There is a big happy coincidence that has set everything up here so that I can move through my life and create the next experience that I want to, just with nuances of little adjustments and tweaks to the experience that I'm having. Do I want to get a different car? Do I want to go there for dinner? Do I want to get into a relationship with this person? I'm free to choose amongst all of those things that by coincidence are there and available for me.
Mm-hmm.
So the big happy coincidence is that same creative power. Because as we set an intention for something to happen, for the awareness of the synchronicities of the numbers, that big happy coincidence makes it happen. As we open ourselves up to a new and uplifting and wonderful, joyous relationship and get out of our way and stop doing the things that we've been doing to create tragic relationships, big happy coincidence delivers up somebody who was perhaps waiting in the wings for us, You know, we've been walking the same route to work every day for the last 7 years, but we never happen to bump into each other. And then suddenly consciousness gets cleared and there we are. Big happy coincidence. And we don't have to explain any of it, any more than we need to explain how the divine, how God, or how the Big Bang is evolving into this next experience that we're having. We get to just accept it. And oh, by the way, since the synchronicities work, when we set our intention to see the sequence of numbers and we become attuned to what astrological signs mean, the reinforcement of that and the experience of it tends to show up in our lives. That's pretty cool. Which one is it? Do you care?
This is going to sound awful. I think each one of them is just a way to express the activity of the divine in the creation. And it goes from there. I don't think I know that each camp will fight for this is it and this makes sense. You know, the science, the people in the science camp will fight for this, and I get it. But I think it's just a way of our trying to express the beginning in the way that resonates with us. You know, the last one that you expressed, the happy coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
That one is a little light for me. I can't, but listen, in some ways it makes just as much sense as anything else, right? I need a little bit more something that I could work with. So the Big Bang and the creation story, they're good. I can work with either one of those. But do I lay my life down and argue with somebody that it is one or the other? No, I don't, because I don't think that we know that. I think
we don't know.
Go ahead.
You want to hear all three of them in one sentence?
Yeah, go ahead. I know you.
In the beginning, there was darkness and void, and then, by coincidence, it exploded. We'll be back in a minute. Are you ready to get results? Now, that's not a rhetorical question. Are you ready to get results? RUR2GR. That's actually the abbreviation for the steps in a practical prayer. Recognition, unification, realization, gratitude, and release, with a couple of extra steps in there in case some doubt creeps in along the way. RUR2GR. This class is about the prayer technique that's common to all of the spiritual practices and religions in the most effective prayers that they have. And by effective, I mean that the prayer works. It actually creates a change in the experience of the person doing the prayer. It gets a result. We're going to begin with theory, and then we're going to take it into practice. By the end of the class, you will have your very own practical prayer that will help create transformation in your life.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
And we were talking about the big happy coincidence, the whole story. In the beginning there was darkness and void, and then by a big happy coincidence it exploded. So there's scripture and coincidence and the Big Bang all rolled into one. And I have no idea which it is. And maybe it's none of the above. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe we're living in the Truman Show, where somebody's putting on all of this around us to make it seem like there's an infinite universe. And it's actually a back lot in Hollywood. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have some suspicions, but I don't know.
I don't think it matters. I really don't. It may make a difference at some point, but especially when things are a wreck, as they feel like they are, even before they were the wreck that they feel like they are now, whenever there's a messiness in life, to be able to go to a point of beginning, for me, is a strength. To go to a point of beginning and let's proceed from there and see how Spirit leads us through that. Now we could do it either way. It doesn't matter which way we do it. It's just that there's a point at which we can begin and follow the breadcrumbs to where we are now. That's what makes sense to me.
Okay. Well, this is the part of the program where we do a practical prayer. So let's do a practical prayer that dispenses with our specific creation story and focuses in on the synchronicities. And the synchronicity, why does that word have to be so difficult? Synchronicities. The synchronicities in our life can be sequences of numbers showing up. They can be the way that a hunch turns into an experience. They can be the coincidence of somebody who we're thinking about calling. The synchronicities can show up in our lives in all sorts of different ways. And if we're using those as a way of reminding ourselves of the divine spiritual nature of the universe, that's great. And whether we have those synchronicities showing up in our lives by the clock turning to 11:11, or the license plate of the car that did not hit your dog being the one that was in the evening's lottery, the synchronicities are ways that we can attach meaning to the things that go on in the world around us. And regardless of what our creation story is, maybe it is all just a big coincidence. Maybe there is one divine power and presence that is revealing itself through all of us, and it has set the stage so that we can't tell that we're all part of the one. Or there could be this divine presence, darkness and void, and God says, let there be light, and starts creating everything, and it's been coming into being. And they're all great stories. And the important part is not what they mean to us, but how they feel to us. So let's go within. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. Just allow yourself, within yourself, to become aware of that divine power and presence that you are. As you breathe out, let go of attachment to being who you are and any clinging that you're doing to your identity. Let go of everything that you think you know. Then a deep breath in. Invite in inspiration. Invite in that guidance, that awareness. Allow your mind to quiet so that you can listen to the still small voice. Perhaps it will say something to you. And as you breathe out, again, surrender your attachment to things being the way that you think they ought to be, or not being the way you think they ought to be, and settle into the fact, the knowledge, the awareness that things are the way that they are and something new is available. Invite that in. And again, when you breathe out, let go of the thought that you know anything. If there's something that you're sure you know, let go of it. Maybe I don't know that. Maybe it's different than I thought. And open to a new possibility. And that is the same creative process that has created everything. The allowing, the opening, the presencing, so that there's room, that there's space, that there's resource, that there's opportunity for newness to show up. If we plant a seed in the garden and it starts to germinate and we dig it up to make sure that it's working properly, we're interfering with the process. We get to trust the process. And know that those synchronicities, those coincidences, those happy unfoldments, those chance encounters, are all bringing good and more good and more good into our lives. It's certainly possible that that's what's happening. So what I claim on behalf of each one who's listening, knowing that we are each expressions of that one infinite creative presence, that one divine essence that is everything, regardless of our story of source. It has been revealing and sharing and unfolding itself since the beginning of whatever this creative process has been, and continues to do that. So this next experience for each of us is an opportunity to become even more fully aware of the truth of our spiritual nature, an opportunity to dive in, to dream big, to be guided, to allow that still small voice to guide us in our next perfect steps, to bring in, by synchronicity, by big happy coincidence, by divine intervention, because they're all the same thing, that goodness, that newness, that uplift that we are desiring. I'm grateful for the wonderful way it's showing up as each of us, and grateful for the awareness of the creative process, the ability to speak this word and release it into that creative law, and to know it's saying yes. It is now saying yes. And so I let it be. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com,
be-the-light.com.
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
Well, there we go. That is the Practical Prayer Podcast number 189. Still crazy.
That's as mind blowing as it's March already.
Yep. And by the end of the month, it will no longer be wintertime.
I know. And listen, to me, it's already not winter, because I have tons of houseplants everywhere. And I've been very attentive to them this year because I want to see certain things. And I see them already recognizing that it's spring.
Nice.
You know, when I look at it, they're just doing little stuff. And I'm thinking, look at this, you know. And it's probably, they were probably doing it all along, but because I've been so attentive and following guidance and all of that, I'm looking at, because it's like, okay, get them ready for spring. And I did all the stuff to get them ready for spring. And it's like, they're looking at me saying, okay, Carol, this is what we're doing. Can you see? Can you see? And
Let's work out the plan.
yeah.
Getting one of those little clipboards and writing out the play. All right, you do this. This one goes over there, and away we go. On your mark, get set, summer.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again to the folks joining us on New Thought Media Network. This has been an episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast. If you have a question or a comment, you can put it into the chat, or you can go to the website. The website is at BeTheLight.com. There it is. There's a section where you can put in a comment, and we'd be happy to hear from you. And in the meantime, it's a minute before. I'm not sure what happens if we stay in the studio after the end time, but I'm scared. I'm scared of what could happen. So, Carol, thank you. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.